Okay, so we are at Hisle Farm Park outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and we'll talk about some of the plants that are here. So this is a walnut tree, and around here it's one of the last trees to get its leaves, and it's also one of the first trees to lose its leaves in the fall. And so this makes walnuts that taste just like store-bought walnuts, but they have a much thicker shell. They're a different species, and you can see it has a kind of a distinctive pattern to the leaves. And if you look up, you can just kind of see how they branch out in sort of a circular pattern from where they come off of the stem. And the leaves are compound leaves. So this whole thing right here is one leaf, and these are leaflets that are compound leaves. And so this whole thing will fall off in the fall. And this one doesn't really seem to have any fruit. Well, here, these are the tiny little fruits just getting started. So these are recently fertilized flowers that are turning into the fruits. Just these little fuzzy things right here. And they'll grow to be a little bit smaller than a tennis ball. And then it has a soft green outer pulp, which is the main part that's used medicinally. It's a really strong astringent. It can be used for the skin. It can be used to kill parasites, a few other things. And
when they're green?
Yeah, for medicinal purposes, you want the outside of the hull, and then the nut is inside the soft hull, kind of soft. So that's a walnut. They're a very long-lived, large tree. And then here at the base of the walnut, we've got a bunch of stuff going on. This vine coming up it is Virginia creeper. It differs from poison ivy in having 5 leaflets instead of 3. So groups of 5 leaflets instead of 3. This is pokeweed, which is poisonous, but which people also eat after boiling a couple times in changes of water. And this is bindweed. Bindweed is sort of like it's in the morning glory family. And it's a very common, it's called bindweed because it wraps around other weeds and binds them together. This is wild lettuce.
Okay, I get confused on the wild lettuce because I've seen others and I thought it was wild lettuce, but the shape was...
The shape is a little bit, it's very similar to dandelion in the shape of the leaves and flowers. The most noticeable thing about it, which is kind of hard to see with this one, but the leaves kind of flatten themselves from side to side in how they're arranged. And then if you pick it, it'll have the white milky sap, which dandelion and sow thistle that are similar looking also have. But it will have, if you look along the middle rib, there will be little spikes along the midline of it. And that's one of the other things that's more distinctive about it. And so what else have we got here?
Wild strawberry.
Oh yeah, okay, down here we've got these false strawberry, as people sometimes call it. Potentilla indica is its Latin name. I usually call it potentilla because I don't like to call a plant a false some other plant, you know. But some people, I learned a few years ago that some children call these snake berries, and I'm not sure why, but I thought that was a cute name for them. So that's what I'm calling them from now on. And then over here is these little yellow flowers are oxalis, and they have kind of clover-like leaves, and they're sour tasting. And then there's a little tiny walnut tree trying to grow here from one of the nuts of this tree, probably. All right. And if we walk over by the barn, often on the edges of buildings, you'll find different plants than you find growing in the other areas around. And this is a plant that loves to grow up against walls and alongside foundations and sometimes fences and things like that. This is called mallow, or Malva neglecta is its Latin name. And it's in the same family as hollyhocks. It's closely related to hollyhocks and fairly closely related to marshmallow and some other cultivated plants. Can be cooked and eaten, but when it is cooked, the water that is cooked in turns really slimy. Sort of like if you've ever made okra or ever eaten okra, it's related to that too.
Okay.
And it's got some of the same slippery stuff in it, which has medicinal uses topically for burns and internally for soothing the digestive system. And this is a really common weed. Uh, I don't think it'll have any fruit on it yet, but the seed pods look like little cheese wheels. We
Okay.
call them fairy cheeses. Um, but yeah, hello. This is mallow, and it is a common plant that grows up against walls and fences and things like that. And it's a soothing demulcent herb when you make an infusion of it, and it can be cooked and eaten as well. And then we walk along the wall a little further. Pokeweed again. This is burdock, which also often grows along edges, along ditches or fences or walls, things like that, especially places where it can't easily get crushed or knocked down. But there's a better specimen around the corner that I want to show you. You can see just how big the leaves of this plant sometimes get. It's like, that's a really big leaf.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. So that's burdock.
This is burdock.
Okay.
And yeah, so it has, it's one of the few herbaceous plants around here that has a leaf that someone could use as an umbrella. It's
Okay.
got very large leaves. And when it's taller, this one's not quite there yet, but the leaves are slightly fuzzy. They're much paler on the underside than they are on the top. Margins are wavy. It will have purple flowers and it will have burrs on it where the flowers develop into seed pods, and the burrs will just hook onto dog's hair or people's clothes or people's hair or dog's clothes, I suppose. But whatever they can, they'll hook onto things and get carried away. Here's last year's burrs. These ones have lost a lot of their stiffness, but these are the burrs, and they will stick to things and stick to each other and get carried somewhere and then fall off and grow into a new one of these if it's a suitable place for them to. So that is burdock, and sometimes it will get 6 feet tall and have leaves about that big. So good sized leaves. Yeah, the root of this plant can be used medicinally or as food. It's bitter, and it can be used to stimulate the liver and digestion. And if you cook the medicinal stuff out of it by boiling it in enough water, it's just kind of like a soft, starchy root vegetable. And then this is its cousin, curly dock. It's called curly because it's got the wavy margins, which that one has also, but this one, the leaves are much smaller, so it's much more noticeable. So this has also got the root of this plant is sort of yellowish. Well, it's pretty yellow, and is a very strong liver stimulating herb. It's used to get the liver to work harder to remove waste products from the body, and sometimes it's used to help clear the skin by working. All right, so this one's called fleabane. It's a very common plant, and the distilled oil from this has been used to repel fleas, but it's not very strong against fleas. This is daylily. It's mostly cultivated as an ornamental, but it's native to Asia, and the flower buds, which get quite a bit bigger than this, when right before they open into flowers, they can be cooked and eaten as well. So it is actually grown as a crop, and as it's a pretty normal vegetable to find in the store in its native range in East Asia. All right, so I want to walk down the road along this tree line towards the pond, and we can kind of see some of the stuff that's growing down that way. Oh, I wanted to talk about these trees first. These two trees are hickory trees. So there are a bunch of types of hickory trees that grow in the woods around here that are native plants here. These two are Cariella cineosa, which is kingnut hickory. And so if you've ever eaten pecans, pecans are a type of hickory nut. And the nuts in hickory, nut meat in hickory nuts tastes just like pecans. It's just in a harder shell, a thicker shell. And these ones are actually even like bigger than pecans. So they have like a really large nut on them.
Okay.
But it's in a really hard shell, so you have to kind of crack it open with a hammer or something like that. Too tough for most nutcrackers. But these were probably planted here, but the same species of trees does grow wild all over Kentucky. Another small walnut tree. But here's another big one. You can see this has got the little fruit growing on it, and these are the leftover pieces of the flower that distributes the pollen. So it's wind pollinated, so it doesn't have a very flowery looking flower. It's got some poison ivy vines growing up it. They seem to be dead, so I guess they've been cut at the base, but and this is one of our most popular edible plants. This is a blackberry, and it's just starting to transition from flowers to fruits, to unripe fruits. So they'll be ripe in a while, like a couple weeks. And there's a nice big wild lettuce plant growing underneath it. So wild lettuce we were seeing. Hello, welcome.
Nice to meet you. Hi, this is my husband Jojo.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, Daniel.
So these are, this is wild lettuce, like we looked at it earlier, but it's a bigger one. So this will get, sometimes it'll get 6 feet tall. There are a few different species around here, but they all tend to have the same shape of leaves and the spiky leaves, spikes along the midrib of the leaf, and the milky sap. The milky sap is the most potent part of the plant to use for medicine, but you can actually just use the whole leaf too, and it's sedating and pain relieving. And then blackberries are edible, but the leaves of blackberries, you make tea out of them, and it's got a lot of nutrients in it. And if you make a really strong tea out of it, it will also slow down diarrhea, kind of dry things up. But blackberries are they're a really important food for the birds, and they're a really important food for people who gather some of their food from the wild in this habitat, because you can get a whole bunch of them at once, and then you can dry them or freeze them or whatever, can them, make preserves and jellies and things like that. So it's a really big transfer of energy from plants to the animals when the blackberries get ripe. And then of course each fruit contains a whole bunch of seeds, and that's how the blackberry gets distributed everywhere, is that birds eat it, especially birds, but also some other animals eat it, and then poop out the seeds all over the fields, and then they grow into new blackberries. So you'll often get big thickets of it. All right, so walk down. Yeah.
Is this raspberry or is this blackberry or something
This
totally
is
different?
blackberry, and the easiest way to tell with these that this is blackberry is the stem is not smooth. It's got furrows that run the length of it. So if you were to cut across it, it would have almost like a star-shaped cross section instead of just a circle. And the thorns are a little bit different, but the stem is, with the kinds that grow around here, the stem is the most recognizable difference between this common blackberry and the black raspberry that's also pretty common and which might actually have ripe fruit on it right now.
Sorry, I have a question about the wild lettuce because I came a little late.
Yeah.
Is that like lettuce as we know, like in the grocery store?
It is probably the same plant. This species of it is probably like an escape from cultivation from someone's garden lettuce generations ago that went to seed, and it just sort of reverts to its well, if you get it when it's very small, you can. If you were to get it at this size, it would be very bitter. And if you let garden lettuce start to get leggy like that and get a tall stem, it will be very bitter too. They call that bolting, but it has a milky sap that's very bitter once it starts to get mature. But when it's new, you could eat it. It's just, yeah.
That's the plant I always get confused. I have a couple at home around, and it's milky, but the leaf looks different. Like it comes out almost like an arrow.
Yeah,
It looks
yeah.
really- it looks different.
Look up sow thistle and see if that might be what you're looking at,
Okay.
because it's a very similar looking plant.
Okay.
All right. This is ragweed. This is giant ragweed. It's not in pollen yet, but it will be before too long. It's kind of ahead of schedule this year, but well, maybe not. But looks like it's having a good year anyway. There's a viburnum. Let's see. These ones, yeah, this is Zizia. It's got these seeds that are sort of like, I don't know, they taste sort of like dill.
But they're good for the immune system, right?
Yeah, they're good for the respiratory system and stuff like that.
My grandma used to collect that, and she would make tea out of it.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, so these blackberries are, I mean, these ones are still in flower. These are raspberries. Some of them are in fruit right now, but not ripe yet. Yeah, so the stem on these is stem on this is actually, that is blackberry. The stem on some of them is round, and on some of them it has furrows along the length of it instead of being smooth. Yeah. Oh, what is this? Oh, here's a lovely blooming batch of it in the sun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this place has tons of blackberries. That tall one there with the white flowers is poison hemlock. We'll get a closer look at that in a few, but it's all over here, very common here. Well, the leaves are different too, and the stems. Everything's a little different. Mm-hmm. It's kind of been a little bit more weed whacked than I expected, but we'll see some stuff soon. You know, lots of these walnut trees, lots of small walnut trees growing along this area. And they take many years from the time that they start growing until the time that they start having flowers and fruits on them. And this is a black cherry here. So it's just got some tiny little, this is about as big as the cherries on it get. You can use them. They are edible when they're ripe. They're pretty sour. You can make jellies and things out of them. The bark, the smooth bark off of the smaller branches is medicinal, and it's used to make cough suppressant medicine. These are teasel. They probably see some fresh plants of them. This is last year's, but it's got a little spiky comb, and birds eat the seeds of these, but they also just sometimes fall on the ground. They like to grow in muddy ground, and each plant, it can grow for a few years, but once it produces seeds, it dies. And then down here, we're starting to get some like perpetually wet ground. And so these are cattails. Cattails, the very base, the underground part of the green leaves is edible. It tastes kind of like cucumber. It's always in mud, so you have to wash it really carefully, and you know, shouldn't get it from anywhere that you wouldn't, that's polluted or anything like that. But the base of the leaves is edible, and the underground roots have a lot of starch in them that can painstakingly be worked out of them and used as starch for cooking. But it's a lot of trouble. The fluff has been used for a variety of household uses, like stuffing quilts and furniture and things like that at different times as well. And the leaves themselves have been used for basketry. This plant right here, this plant is the one that the spiky things grow on. This is teasel, and teasel where each pair of leaves joins the stem, it builds up a little cup of water, and that cup of water attracts insects that get stuck in it, and it digests them. So it's a carnivorous plant. But yeah, just has these little water traps right here that actually even, and it, like I said, it usually grows in mud. It likes to grow in wet ground, which a lot of carnivorous plants do. But it doesn't only grow in wet ground. Sometimes it'll grow in drier ground. There's some poison ivy along the way in here, so probably don't come down here. This one's poison ivy, if you're not familiar with it. It's got little, instead of 3 leaflets, often a little bit of red coloration right where they join together, and it's a vine. But yeah, it's a very common plant. If you get off the beaten path at all around here, it's a very common thing to find. And it kind of, that is a honeysuckle bush.
It looks like lavender or purple. I was
Yeah, it's
thinking
kind of
white.
purplish on the top. The flowers are white,
Okay.
but the leaves can change color a little bit depending on how much sun they're getting. Uh, the root of teasel can be used for, is traditionally used for arthritis. Some people use it for Lyme disease, and it's kind of a popular use for it right now, but I haven't really had much luck with trying it for that. Here's some young growth of blackberries with lots of flowers on them. And yeah, this honey poison hemlock has purplish spots on it and a sort of powdery coating on the stem. And then it'll grow sometimes 6 feet, some tight umbrella shaped cluster of flowers at the top. And it's a very common weed around here. Lots of cattails down here. There's a little teasel starting to grow there. There's a little teasel starting to grow there. And you can see the poison ivy here is basically like a little tree. It's, you know, you usually think of it as a vine. If you find something to vine up, it will. If you touch it, it can get you pretty badly. But yeah, so this is one of the forms that poison ivy takes around here. Sometimes people in Kentucky call this habit, this shape of it, poison oak. But in most of the country, poison oak refers to a different but related species. You can also make tea or tincture of yarrow internally to break fevers and reduce congestion. So it's a very versatile herb. People have been using it since before in history. Its Latin name is Achillea because the Greek warrior Achilles uses it in Homer's Iliad to treat battlefield injuries. Not his own because he's basically invincible, but those of his people who are fighting for him.
So yellow yarrow, the same.
It's pretty much the same. It's just a variety that's been bred for its looks. But so this is the wild stuff tends to look just like this, but sometimes the yellow and pink varieties go wild, but they often revert to looking like that once they do. But they've all got about the same properties. And if you pick a leaf and crush it between your fingers and smell it, it has a particular distinctive kind of camphory smell to it. And that's what makes it work, is the stuff that gives it that aromatic scent to
So
it.
it's the leaves and not the flowers.
It's all the parts of it above ground, really.
Did you dry this before making a tincture?
I do, yeah. It dries pretty quickly because got so much surface area where the leaves are so finely divided that it dries out really nicely.
Just rub your fingers, like kind of briskly, just smell it the camphor.
I think we have some in the backyard. All those herbs on top of the hill, like when you go on top, it's a bunch of stuff back there. And it's real familiar. Yeah, I'll touch it. Just to have, or just a touch. Oh, it gets on you like a perfume.
So these trees right here are the main reason I brought you down here. These are willow trees. They often will grow just like what you see here in water, or at the edge of water, or at places that are flooded half the year or something like that. Weeping willow is a variety that has kind of leaves that hang down and branches that hang down, but there are many species of willow. With basically all of them, the bark, especially the bark from the smaller branches, the smoother bark from the smaller branches, contains some anti-inflammatory stuff called salicin, which is reduces pain, reduces fevers, and reduces swelling, inflammation. So it's a really useful medicinal plant, and you know, you can easily find it in great abundance if you find a place where it likes to grow. And when it's cut, it will grow back new branches where it was cut. So it's something that can be sort of cultivated or harvested pretty intensively from if you have a tree or a few trees of it to work with. And then back here we have some pretty invasive Siberian irises, these yellow flowers. They were brought over here as an ornamental plant for people's water features, and now they're kind of everywhere. But they stick to certain types of habitat like this. Often grow alongside the cattails.
I'd much rather see those than cattails. Well, no, I mean I like them both. I love the color.
Yeah, they're pretty. Yeah, interesting shape of flower to them.
Yeah, I like them.
And they're kind of fan shaped leaves. The leaves are kind of, come out in a fan shape from the base.
And what was the name? You said iris. What was the name of it?
Siberian iris, yellow iris. And we have a couple of irises that are native to Kentucky as well. We have one that's called crested dwarf iris, which is only 4 inches tall or so. And then we have blue flag, which is about the same size as these.
The one that's about 4 inches. Is it purple?
Yeah,
I think it's
purple and white often.
But you said these have to be near water, like if you
Yeah,
to
pretty
take them to
much.
your
Yeah,
yard, you need a wet.
you need a wet place or like a pond or something like that.
Okay.
The blue flag iris will grow in shady ground or in water
Okay.
or at the edge of water like this.
I want to plant some out by my cattails.
I really like it. Oh yeah, I thought that was in the heart. That looks like water nearby. Yeah.
All right, let's get out of this person's way, and then I want to go back and show you something there. Here's another place where you can look at the water cups of the teasel plant without wading through poison ivy to get to it. You can see all these bright green through here. That's all teasel that's starting to come up at the edges here.
A bunch of little nets.
Yeah. Yeah. Eaten by plants.
Yeah.
This little white plant here is, these little white flowering things here are called corn salad or valerianella, and they're an edible plant. Although in this case they're pretty dusty from the road. But corn salad, I have no idea why they decided to name it corn salad. I have no idea. It's a very... So yeah, here we got some, again, of small nut trees. So this was probably field up until a certain point. It was being mowed or whatever. And so then when they stopped, walnut trees were one of the things that started growing. So often you'll find like a same age stand of trees that started growing around the same time. These ones at the end are a little older, but all of these look like they're around the same age. Yeah. Well, and then this one with the weird bark here is a hickory tree, another kind of nut tree. And then this one with the kind of flaky bark, that's a cherry tree. So when you get used to them, you can tell trees by their bark.
Are there any pecan trees in there?
No, but these kind of hickory trees, the nut's pretty similar to a pecan. It's actually a little bit bigger than a pecan, but with a slightly harder shell. mean, there might be some pecan trees somewhere on this farm, but most of the hickory trees seem to be this one type that's called a king nut hickory. But the nut meat's the same as a pecan. Pecan's just a, a hickory that's, oh yeah, pecans are just a hickory that people grow for their nuts. There's, yeah, they're wild, but like they'd harvest some, plant some, and leave them there because they'd come through an area and hunt and gather, and not necessarily live right there, but come through and hunt and gather. And with a tree like that, you can come back in 100 years and it'll still be there producing nuts. It's not like a cornfield that you have to dig up and replant every year or two. So this is red clover, and yeah, in the advanced class we were talking about red clover this week, and it contains some isoflavones, also known as phytoestrogens, that sort of act like estrogen. Excuse me. But yeah, red clover is, it's also traditionally used as a mild stimulant to the liver, but in modern herbal medicine, the main thing that it's well known for is as sort of something that can substitute for and help to balance out estrogen.
Isn't it good for
hot flashes and things like that? Yeah, menopausal type symptoms. And then this one, this seed head, and this is plantago. It is a very common weed in people's yards. If you get stung by a bee and you crush this up and put it on the sting, it will take the pain right out of it. So really good first aid for kids. Good. It's a common enough plant that it's in everybody's yards. It's more recognizable when it's growing in shorter grass, but it has these veins that all run the same direction, and it's got a leaf that's wider than a finger, and they grow sort of in a circle around the stem of the plant.
Do they work for ant bites? So
yeah, stings, bites. They work for small cuts and burns too. Excuse me.
Broadleaf will do the same thing.
Yeah, and the broadleaf version of it is right here. It totally different, more oval shaped, but it's got the same main veins running the same direction, running the length of the leaf instead of branching out so much. And yeah, they're good, astringent and pain relieving. Oh my goodness. Oh, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks so much. You'd be surprised how many species you can find in a regular backyard.
Yeah, I want some of my own red clover, and I was like, can we take some?
It doesn't transport well, but you can get seeds for it. You can get seeds for it and plant
like
it.
Lowe's, you mean?
Probably.
Okay. Because I want my own little red clover.
People grow it for food for cows, and that's why you can get seeds for it. Yeah, because it's got a lot of protein in it compared to regular hay. So people grow it for pasture, seed pastures with it. And that's actually probably why it's here.
What's that purple?
Yeah, what's those purple things back there? Those,
What are
like flowers, but they're
I think they're flowers, but I'm not sure which kind. Let's see. Let's go look. Okay, so this is a vetch, and it's a member of the bean family, like clover is.
What is it called?
Vetch. And it's also something that people plant as a forage crop. And let's see,
What does it do?
it's just something that it fertilizes the soil. It fixes nitrogen. So you can grow it and the cows can eat it, or you can grow it and then plow it under, and it'll fertilize the soil. And bees love it.
I bet they do.
And
Okay.
What was this called again?
Yeah, so
There's a bee right there.
yeah,
Bee was rubbing down.
yeah. So these little flowers, they have a lot of nectar in them. So yeah, bees and other insects love it. Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Slow to spread. Oh, look at the horses.
Yeah, people bring horses out here, ride them around. Let's see. Let's try going this way. See what's over here. Water. We got a big, proper pond back here. So this is an eastern red cedar. It's a very aromatic tree. A lot of the time people just call it a cedar tree. When English-speaking people came to this country, came to North America in general, they named a whole bunch of different plants cedar because they'd read about cedars in the Bible and they knew that they were some sort of an aromatic evergreen tree, but they didn't really know what they looked like. So there are a whole bunch of unrelated plants throughout the English-speaking parts of the world that have the name cedar that are all aromatic evergreens but are not really related to each other and not really closely related to the actual cedars in Lebanon that are talked about in the Bible. So this is eastern red cedar specifically, and the inside of the wood is bright purple, and it has a very nice smell to it. It's known for repelling moths and other rodents and other things that are destructive to clothing. So it's sometimes used as closet lining and stuff like that. Medicinally, the leaves can be made into a tincture or made into a tea or burned for smoke, and it will break up congestion. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the sage, they'll put
Uh-huh.
cedar. They'll put cedar with the sage.
Right, yeah, and breathe in the smoke, and it'll yeah, if you have congestion, it'll make you cough it up more. And topically, it can be used as a wound wash to keep infection from setting in. So it's got a variety of uses. The outer bark is also kind of fibery and can be used for basketry.
Like Christmas wreaths made out of it. I've seen that too. Where they put it.
Do they grow like these berries?
Yeah, the cones look like little berries,
Okay.
and birds eat them and again distribute the seeds. And so this is actually, if you drive up I-75 towards Cincinnati, you'll see these growing all over the sides and sometimes in the median in places where nothing else really grows, like because they don't really need good soil or anything like that. So they're often like one of the first trees to regrow after an area has been bulldozed or something like that. And they grow slowly and they live a pretty long time. Well, they'll start growing quickly, but sometimes, like I have one in my yard that's about this tall, and it's been about that tall for 10 years. And it's just like, it's not in a real sunny spot, so it just kind of got that size and just stayed that way. Yeah, it's like a little Charlie Brown Christmas tree. My outdoor bonsai tree is what I call it. But
People used to make like cedar chests out of those. Seems like
Yeah.
wood is popular.
yeah, the wood's popular
I
for.
hear about it. I don't hear about it anymore, but people always wanted like a cedar chest when I was.
Yeah. Well, people use it to store clothes in and stuff, and
Yeah.
really Tupperware works better for keeping bugs out and stuff because it's airtight. But this
But
is
that wood was
it's
popular.
was popular, and it's like you can still go to Lowe's and buy like cedar wood paneling for closets and stuff like that. Yeah. And it looks like right in between the trunks here, it looks like some squirrels have built a nest. Those pile of leaves
We
there.
have a bird's nest on our front porch. A robin has
Oh, yeah?
nested there. And
Yeah.
we're like, why did it pick our porch?
It's probably out of the rain. And you know what? One thing that robins really like is to find a spot where nothing can see them from above.
It's like in a
So
corner.
right, so like they'll get under the eaves of a house or something like that, so that hawks and crows can't come down and eat their babies.
Oh, that's
So it's kind of like they like it to be a little sheltered
Well,
from
this
above.
is her second time nesting. Like she had some babies or whatever you call the little baby birds about 3 weeks ago. And now she's back.
And now she's back.
So we're not touching her nest. We're gonna leave
Nice.
it there.
I'm gonna walk in here and see if there's anything good back here. Smells like fish. So here's the raspberry cane, and you can see it's got this powdery wax coating on it too, and it's got a much smoother stem. And then this, which is not what the berry is growing on, this is sarsaparilla. This vine right here. Yes. It's especially what gives root beer its body is the root of this, or the
berries?
no, the berries are raspberries,
Oh,
and this is a little vine that's wrapping around them.
Two different things.
Yes,
Okay.
two different things.
So this is raspberry.
Yeah, and this
That's
is
root beer or sarsaparilla.
sarsaparilla. Yeah. So this is Smilax rotundifolia, I believe is the species. There's a bunch of different species of Smilax, but they're used the same medicinally. So these have briars on the stem, and the underground part has thorns on it too. And if you dig it up and use it to brew root beer out of, you have to chop it up and boil it, and then let it sit in hot water overnight or so. And it thickens the water, and so it makes the root beer foamy.
Does anybody like root beer? I love root beer too. I love it. I love Dr. Pepper.
I love Dr. Pepper.
If you look right back here, you can see this vine just getting started, and the base of it is covered in prickles. And then it's got these long skinny tendrils that'll wrap around things when it finds stuff to wrap around. So this is the Smilax plant getting started, and this is it a little more firmly established. And those two plants might be connected underground.
Can you eat the wild raspberry? Like, are those?
Oh yeah, they're just black raspberries.
They're black raspberries, not blackberries.
Right.
Okay.
But they're very similar. The main difference is if you pick these when they're ripe, they come off like a little thimble. And if you pick the blackberry, they bring a little bit of the stem with it. And these just kind of pull off like a thimble. But they taste very similar. They're very closely related. The difference between blackberries and raspberries is really kind of like a human defined thing. It's more of a culinary distinction than a botanical distinction. They're as closely related to each other as different species of blackberry are to each other. But they're just like got a little bit of a different texture to them. So these ones ripen a few weeks before the blackberries that are out in the field. And these ones tolerate shade a little bit better. They start growing a little earlier before the trees are as leafed out. So they soak up some sun while it's not as shady here. And then they fruit in a darker place than the blackberries, which fruit out in the full sun. So yeah, that's the sarsaparilla plant. Sarsaparilla is also good for moving the lymph in the lymph system. If somebody has swollen nodes or areas that where they have a lot of swelling in their feet or something like that, it can really help to get that to go away. It also will try and grow across trails. Just like poison ivy, this plant is sort of something that forms barriers along edges and stuff like that. So it kind of limits foot traffic by being tangly and thorny and stuff like that. Poison ivy isn't tangly and thorny as much as it just makes you itch later. But
What part of the sarsaparilla do you use?
the underground part of it, it's like,
Is it the root?
it's, you could call it the root, but it's really just the underground stem. And it looks just like the stem that's above ground, except it's whiter and sometimes a little bit thicker. Looks kind of bone-like, and it's real hard, but you have to chop it up and cook it for a long time to get the good stuff out of it.
Including tincture or just
Yeah, I wouldn't try to make it into a tincture without doing the water part of it as a hot thing first for a while. This is multifloral rose. It was brought here from Eastern Asia, and it's become a very common plant in hedges and edges. It has lots of little rose flowers on it right now, and later on it will have lots of rose hips on it, which can be boiled. They've got the texture of them. They're mostly seed, but you can take a whole big pot of them and boil them and strain the seeds out and make like a rosehip jelly out of it. They got a lot of vitamin C in them. And then there's some poison ivy over here too. And then next to that, this is a grapevine, a little baby grapevine. And
Oh wow, it is a grapevine.
yeah, this kind of grape, they're called fox grapes. They'll grow up things and they will fruit up in the sunlight, but they'll start growing down here in the dark, down here in the shade.
Do scuppernongs grow in Kentucky? I know.
Muscadines do.
Muscadine, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Maybe we'll see some.
Make some Moscato.
Yeah. It's so sweet and good.
Is this the what you mentioned about the
Yes, these are the bulblets of garlic. So you can see this is wild garlic that's gone to scape. And so it's got these little bulb type things on the top. And when that comes open, it's got this, which is a cluster of tiny little garlic bulbs that will fall down and plant themselves. And they'll send roots into the ground and then suck themselves underground with it. And then there's more poison ivy here. So it's all along the edges. Yeah.
seed is rosehip.
Yeah, multifloral rose.
Multifloral, thank you.
Yeah.
So is this poison ivy too? These
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Everywhere. Oh my goodness.
It's everywhere, except right in the middle of the trail. So this is, well, that's fishing line. I
You got
didn't see it, but I
think you
felt it.
snapped it. Yeah.
So this is a cherry tree. And if you look at the bark of the cherry tree, you can see it has these little, these are called lenticels. They're just these little whitish markings that are kind of horizontal on it. And that makes it, and the bark is sort of a silvery, shiny color. So that's an easy way to recognize wild cherry when it doesn't have flowers or fruit on it. The leaves are distinctive once you get used to them, but they're pretty plain looking. This is a white pine. It's one of multiple species of pine trees in Kentucky. It's probably the most common, at least as far as finding it growing wild. And the way that you can differentiate it from other pine trees is that on all pine trees, the needles come in little packets like this, little bundles. And in white pine, there are 5 needles per bundle, and they have sort of a whitish stripe down the length of the needle, or kind of a whitish color to them. On top of the green, but the 5 needles per bundle is the easiest thing to recognize about them. It's a very common pine tree in Kentucky. Pine needle tea is decongestant and has vitamin C and some other minerals and nutrients in it. It's not exactly satisfying, but it will keep you from starving. Now this is white clover. This is Dutch white clover. And it was actually brought over here as forage for bees rather than as for cattle and stuff, because it'll grow just in a lawn. You know, it's like grows real low to the ground like this, but it's good food well, it produces a lot of nectar if you have honeybees. Oh, here's a great, lovely stand of poison hemlock right here. Let's see if I can get close to this without there being too much poison ivy. So anyway, here is the flower of poison hemlock. So it's got a purplish stem, smooth purplish stem, grows taller than a person's height, although it starts out small. And it's got these leaves that are finely divided, like,
Isn't that poison?
yes, poison. And it's quite poisonous. It smells kind of like celery. Tastes kind of like celery too, but it kills you. And it actually changes the way that your body uses calcium, blocks calcium from working in your nervous system, and keeps your nervous system from being able to conduct electricity in the appropriate way to keep your heart beating. So you could call it a calcium antagonist, calcium channel blocker. But, you know, to such an extent that it kills you. And
To touch. Just
it's
don't.
basically okay to touch.
ingest
Yeah,
it.
don't ingest it. Don't get a bunch of the juice on your skin. Like, I've heard that, you know, if you're like out weed whacking it and stuff, that you might be able to absorb enough poison. I don't know if anybody really ever has, though. But,
Oh, no.
you know, picking it, touching it just a little bit, I'm not worried about that at all. But yeah, so this was brought over here as an ornamental also. Like so many of these plants that are here are not actually native plants here. They're plants that were brought to this area by people coming here. And in the case of a lot of them, they were just brought here for looks. So poison hemlock was just kind of grown because it looks sort of like fern-like,
Yeah.
especially, and it starts growing in the late winter in this environment. It doesn't even wait till spring. It starts growing in February or so.
I guess they didn't know it was poisonous.
Oh, they knew it was poisonous. They were just like, oh, it looks
It looks
neat.
pretty.
We'll put it in a pot. We'll put it on
Oh,
the
it looks
porch.
pretty.
And, you
It
know,
killed me though.
yeah, you know, they were like, we won't eat it.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we'll feed it to the neighbors if we don't like them, you know. Handy to have around. But
Put it in a pie. Here, want some pie?
you could probably substitute it for parsnips or carrots without anybody knows. It looks a lot like parsnip.
Yeah.
It's closely related, fairly closely related to carrots and parsnips. And
It is a bunch of it.
yeah, there's a whole bunch of it. And that's often how you find it, is just whole bunches of it. And it will grow there for, you know, if you came back here 10 years from now, this will probably still be here. It will grow there until trees grow up over it and shade it out or something like that. Well, and each of these flowers, each of these, you know, umbrellas of flowers produces hundreds of little seeds. And so they'll, you know, even if you were to pull it all out and weed kill it all and everything, there would still be seeds in the ground and it would come back next year.
I see more dandelion. I don't see as much dandelion as I predicted.
Right? Yeah.
Guess they chopped it all down when you cut the grass.
And here we've got a little bit of yarrow growing again. You know, the yarrow is kind of shaped similar to the poison hemlock,
What
but
is that called?
yarrow.
Yarrow. Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that earlier.
Yeah, we saw it earlier. Yeah.
You can kind of confuse those two though, because it does look like the poison.
I mean, yeah, from a distance especially, but it's much smaller and it's
Yeah.
fuzzier and the stems are different. Here's dandelion. It's around, it's just inconspicuous.
I thought we'd see like fields and
Right.
fields of dandelion.
And there's the zizia, the yellow one, which is kind of similar shape to poison hemlock, but, you know, bright yellow so you don't mistake it.
And what's the name again of that?
Zizia.
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 That's a cool name.
Yeah, I like that name. Zizia. There goes a red-winged blackbird.
Another pond back there. Or maybe the same one. Oh, okay. Oh, it's a different angle. Okay. There was another pond.
Burrowing in these
Where? I didn't
Like
see it.
walking
keep seeing little
along.
holes every once in a while in the ground. Like what burrows here? Is it
Oh,
rabbit
lots
holes?
of things. There's rabbits, there's
Okay.
groundhogs if there's bigger holes. There's if it's small holes, it could be chipmunks, it could be crayfish.
Oh,
They make like little mud volcanoes
oh
around
yeah,
their
mud bugs.
holes.
That's what some people call them.
Yeah,
Mud
yeah,
bugs.
mud
Right.
bugs.
Yeah, keep
Huh.
repeating that. Mud bugs. They truly are.
Yeah, sounds appetizing. Got the wild transformer, electric transformer.
What is that thing?
Yeah, I don't know what that, like, what is that even to?
I wonder what is that good for. Oh, they just might have a house here. Buttercups. It just looks so
Got little
random.
buttercups growing in the grass here.
That's a lot of them.
And here we got the Virginia creeper again. This is not poison ivy. It has 5 leaflets per leaf instead of 3 most of the time. But right there hiding amongst it is poison ivy. And so,
What is the nice one called? Or the
Virginia creeper is the nice one.
poisonous?
It's not poisonous. It doesn't usually cause rashes or anything like that.
Not invasive to the tree.
Yeah, it looks like it's gonna kill the tree though. Eventually, it's
It
hiding
grows
inside.
on the tree, but I don't think it will really, it doesn't like suck nutrients from the tree or anything. It just uses the tree as a structural support to get up where the sunlight is. So I don't think that, that it really will kill it or anything.
It just seems like it's hiding the sun from the tree though, kinda.
Well, from the bark, but the bark's not really going to do the most of the photosynthesizing. Mostly it's the leaves. But yeah, you can see the poison ivy up in there. So don't necessarily think, oh, it's just Virginia creeper. I can go up and walk through it and whatever, because there can be poison ivy inconspicuously hiding amongst it. Let's see. Oh, we got some white flowering vetch here.
Oh, I didn't see
Same basic stuff, but different genetics, different coloring.
What's the name of that plant again? Vetch, you said?
Vetch, yeah.
So that's white vetch.
Yeah.
The butterflies seem to like it.
Yeah. Mm. Oh yeah, they got a little dock out there. I remember seeing that last time we were here, but I didn't know it was there before that.
There was fish in there last time.
Uh-huh.
So is that the same cedar we're looking at with
Yeah, that's the red cedar again.
some seeds, berries,
Yeah, cones, but
oh yeah, this is the one.
commonly known as berries. They're not really berries. They're really like, they're kind of pretty hard, and they're a little bit squishy.
So we can't
But
make gin out of those, huh?
oh no, you can definitely make gin out of those.
Oh, that's a good
Um,
question. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, gin is juniper berries, and that's basically what these are. But they're not considered berries botanically. They're more like cones that have flesh on them so that birds will eat them.
And it's actually green underneath.
Yeah, when they're more mature, they're harder in the center, but these ones are soft and squishy a little bit. So this is a walnut that still has the flowers on it. So it's a little bit later in its process than some of the other ones that we've seen. But these are the pollen distributing organs of the walnut tree.
This one's not walnuts, right?
Well, what is that one? I think that this is a different species. I think that this one is called tall blue lettuce, but I'm not completely sure. But yeah, uh, it's a different species than what we saw before. Yeah, it does. It feels so cool for it nearly being June. I'm just kind of constantly surprised. So lots of the yarrow growing out here. This white stuff that's kind of close to the ground is all the yarrow that we saw before. Um, so it's another plant that will grow in the same spot for as long as the spot remains a sunny field type of habitat. So this is another plant that could easily be mistaken for dandelion, but isn't. This is chicory, and chicory has similar shaped leaves to dandelion. I'll click one. Yeah, out of the roots. Yeah, you take the roots and roast them. It's bitter. It's basically the same plant as endive lettuce, but it's the wild variety of it. So it's quite bitter, and yeah, the leaves by themselves are diuretic. They stimulate the kidneys. The root, yeah, is mostly known for being roasted and made into coffee. It also, the nice thing about chicory root as a medicine is that it will help replenish somebody's gut flora after they've had antibiotics or a sickness that's disrupted it. So it has a lot of starches in it that people can't really digest, but the gut bacteria can, and so it's a good nourishing thing for that type of situation. Yeah, and it's got little blue flowers when it blooms. So these are locust trees, and they're another common tree of disturbed ground, often one of the first things that will start growing back in a pasture or something like that. They're also in the bean family, just like the vetches are. They have very similar flowers, like a larger version of what the white vetch has, and very hard wood, but they fix nitrogen in the soil too. So they do make the soil more fertile again after it's been overgrazed or overfarmed. And like I said, you'll often find them growing in disturbed grounds. So along railroad tracks or in the middle of old fields and places like that, it's often one of the trees that you'll find. Yeah, they have thorns. Some of them, honey locusts, have gigantic thorns. These ones don't have as much thorn on them. There are some thornless varieties that people have developed as well that have become wild too. But there are some honey locusts around here that have thorns that are maybe 6 inches long, and sometimes the thorns have thorns growing off of those. And they're basically, and they grow right out from the trunk as well, so that like animals can't rub up against it and push the tree over. Some people suspect that that's a holdover from when we had mastodons and that sort of thing here in Kentucky, elephants, but none of those running around at the moment. Yeah, here's a big healthy dandelion. You can see how big the leaves can get. They can get, good size. And the stems will get really long up where the wind can catch them. So if they're growing in a very short area of grass, they'll be right against the ground sometimes to avoid the mower blades. If they're growing just in medium grass like this, sometimes you get them like that. But if they're among tall grass, sometimes they're pretty long. So,
I've actually never seen one
yeah, yeah, right. So they can get pretty long. It's in, they just keep growing until they're feeling the wind, and then they go to seed, put out their little puff balls. Let's go see this little patch of weeds over here. Kind of. There's a type of plant, a class of plants that we call rooterals, which means that it literally means that they grow in rubble, but it just kind of in general means that they grow in very disturbed ground. So this is a good example of that kind of habitat. So we got the pokeweed here. This is poison hemlock, looking all ferny down there. This tree is called a hackberry tree, and you often find them growing in this type of environment as well. You can recognize hackberry trees most easily by their warty bark. They've got these bumpy things on the bark that look like they're made out of layers and layers of cork. Well, they are made out of layers and layers of cork, but they look kind of like pages of a book or something.
Was that tree probably struck by lightning or something? Is that why?
Probably something like that. It's been split at some point, yeah. And then over here, got a mulberry tree. Mulberries also like to grow in this type of environment. This one is just about right, but not quite yet. So in some places, depending on the sun and stuff like that, mulberries are ripe right now. And in some places, they're still working on it. With mulberry trees, not all trees have fruit. They have basically male and female plants. So just some of them are fruit bearing. Some of them only make pollen. It's in the same family as figs. But it also, because it makes lots of seeds and because birds eat them, it's often a thing that you'll find, and it will grow in rocky ground or, piles of debris or whatever. So it is also a rooteral, something that you'll often find growing in this type of environment. And then these are thistles here. And you find this type of environment all around town, all around human habitation, whether it's town or farms or whatever, places where people with construction equipment have been, and they just, shove everything, rocks and tree stumps and stuff out of the way, and you'll get areas like this that are growing with largely the same group of plants. Oh, and here's another good one. Hang on, let me crawl back in here and get it for you. This is garlic mustard. And garlic mustard is a mustard green, and it tastes garlicky. And it likes to grow in shade. It starts, like what I said about poison hemlock, it starts growing in winter and puts its leaves out. And so these leaves are really big, and it will put up flowering stems and have lots of seeds on them as well. Another thing that really likes to hang out in these areas are burrowing animals like mice and things that eat them like snakes. So if you're like crawling around in this type of environment, you really want to watch out for snakes.
Did you say this big leaf thing here is called poke?
This one is, yeah, with the
Can't you eat that?
magenta stem. Yes, you can eat it, and it's poisonous. So if you eat it raw, it's poisonous.
Oh, I've heard of
It will
poke salad.
make you very sick. Yes. So you boil it, and then you strain the water off, and then you boil it again in separate water.
Okay,
And
so it's a method.
so it's a method to it. When it very first starts growing, before there's any red on the stem, so even earlier than this, you can eat it raw.
Because I've heard of,
Yeah,
older generations eating cold
for
salad.
sure. And it's and people still do, but you got to get it when it's real tiny to eat it raw.
Like that. Don't do
But
that.
with that, you would more like want to, if you were going to eat that at all, you would want to boil it in a few changes of water. Usually what I do is I get it when it's small and tender, like about this size, and then boil it a couple of times. And it's a pretty decent vegetable. If you get poisoned by it, it doesn't. I looked a few years ago to try and find an example of anyone being killed by it. There haven't been any fatalities from it in like modern times or recent times. But it will make you really, really sick.
Okay.
But yeah, no, if you fix it right, it's good food. Which is kind of a strange thing to have something that is poisonous, but also one of the more commonly eaten wild foods in Kentucky.
I've heard of cold salad several times from older people.
For sure. Yeah, here you can see how it looks when it's first coming up. And if somebody were to come by and mow this, in a week or two, it would start again. So this underground, this is going to have a root that's probably the size of my arm, a big root, and it will just keep coming back from that root for years and years. And so, if it gets cut down, if it gets all cut down, it will start growing back up again from the root.
But people ate it, because
You can just, it's plentiful, right. These are the leaves of violet. There might be one blooming here and there, but it mostly blooms in the spring, and then it kind of puts out a flower here and there for the rest of the year. But it's got these heart-shaped leaves, very common to find in grassy areas. A lot of people really, hate them and try and spray them with weed killer and stuff because they want just grass. But it's I think they're nice. I don't see any real problem with them. They don't get any bigger than this, really. They don't like take over your yard or anything. They just make it not have a uniform appearance, which I don't really care about. But the leaves, they contain similar salicin, similar to what's in the willow bark. So they can also be used as a pain reliever. I also like to gather the flowers and make a tea out of them and preserve that with sugar so that it's like a violet syrup. And sometimes I put a little bit of sugar in it and then a little bit of mother of vinegar and let it turn into a violet vinegar, which I can use as an ingredient in salad dressing. So, yeah.
Violet jelly. That was good.
Yeah.
Or toast? Yeah. I guess it's similar to like rhubarb. You have to, make rhubarb jelly and stuff. I don't know, it's like that. It tastes like strawberry. Kind of like strawberry.
This is a calorie pear, also called a Bradford pear. And these were a really popular ornamental tree in the 70s and 80s, I guess. Maybe a little before that too, but definitely then. They were like the tree to plant between your house and the street for a few years. And people believed that they were sterile and that the fruits from them that they would never grow from seed, and so that you didn't have to worry about new ones growing and whatever. They were wrong about that. Like 99% of them were sterile, and the other 1% made enough seeds to make up for it. And then the seeds from those trees were, of course, the non-sterile ones. And so now it's a very, very, very weedy tree. And a couple years ago, this whole farm just had tons and tons and tons of it. This one looks like somebody was going to kill it and then changed their mind because it's got the saw marks along the trunk. But
So this will give you pears, though. Like
it'll give you terrible little starlings are. They're very noisy birds that travel in huge flocks. And so what these pairs do is they ripen and they're really hard as a rock. And then they go through this other process called bletting. And when they blet, they ferment. And basically the juice in them turns into wine, indigestible. So the starlings eat these things, get drunk, and scream all night long, and then fly around pooping out the seeds everywhere. So it's a very successful reproduction strategy. Once a year, this tree throws a huge party for the birds, and they all come and have a wild time, and then they go and plant more of this tree. So it's a very common tree to just come up as a weed in people's yards if they're not mowing it, or in pastures and things like this as well. And most of the ones in this farm have been cut down. This one, for whatever reason, it looks like they got midway through it, and maybe it was lunchtime, and then they forgot about it. Right? Yeah, you can see that if they started hacking into it, then they're like, maybe the whistle blew, and they're like, quitting time.
It was a Monday problem. Like it was Friday, and it was like, this is a Monday problem.
Right.
It's a lot of hot dogs.
This is an Osage orange. This is the tree that has these big green brain-shaped fruits on it later in the year. And it's also a very weedy tree, but it is a native species, or it's native to North America. Might not be native to this specific area, but it's been here for a long time. It's got very hard wood. Sometimes people who are into bow making use this to make bows for bow and arrows. The fruit's not really edible to people, but it's in the same family as the mulberries and also as figs. So it's like it's a giant mulberry, but it's not very edible. And then here at the base of it, we have yarrow again.
The leaves are pretty. I like how the leaves are all nice and fluffy.
Yeah. And it will grow as a hedge or as a tree, depending on whether there's sunlight around it and whether it gets chopped down and stuff like that. If you were to come along and chop this down, it would just send up a bunch of stems from the roots and grow into a little bush. And you can see it's got some happy little poison ivy. Well, it just wants to get up where the sunlight is, Yeah. Stay out.
There's some more of the iris things.
More of the irises, more of the cattails mixed in with the irises. That's a maple tree.
Oh, okay. Maple tree?
Uh-huh. Oh.
I'm surprised we haven't seen any frogs or anything.
Yeah, it's interesting that we haven't seen any frogs here or by the pond. All right, we'll head up by the barn, and then we can go out into the field that's a little past that and see what's growing there. Maybe a lot of the same stuff, maybe some different things. This is an oak tree. There are lots of different kinds of oak trees too, but they all make acorns. I think this one's a bur oak. So these can live for hundreds and hundreds of years. Here's a good example of the narrow leaf plantain growing not encumbered by a bunch of other stuff, so you can see how it all kind of grows out in a single clump like that. This one. What is that? That is a bloody crane's bill. It's a geranium. It's called crane's bill because of the beaky shape of the seed pods here. Yeah, it's called bloody because of the red color. This is another kind of oak tree.
Oh, it's an oak tree.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever seen the leaves like that.
Right. There are a lot of different, most oaks have lobed leaves like around the edge. This one's not very deep. They're almost like toothed.
Oh, okay.
But some of them even have smooth edges to the leaves. You go see what's going on over here. Got some good poison hemlock. Here's a little cedar tree. So this one's, I don't know how many years old, but it's been here for a while, but it's not very big. Yeah, it's just a little bush, but it's the same plant as the big tree ones. And then lots of the poison hemlock and pokeweed. It's quite invasive, yep.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Yep. And you can see this area has been like they've piled some mulch here, and the mulch has probably killed off whatever was on the ground before they put it here. And then these are things that have, come back quickly. Lots of little plants of wild lettuce here.
That's wild lettuce.
That's wild lettuce.
And you said
said you can eat it that way when it's little.
But when it's very small, yeah. Once it starts to grow up, it gets pretty bitter, which, you know, garden lettuce will do the same thing. But yeah, it's got pain relieving properties as well. And then got some blackberries trying to come up in here.
There's another
Yep, another little cedar tree.
or bush.
Yeah, cedar bush.
What's with all the mulch? Like, what? Why is it?
It is probably things that have fallen and been cut down that they've
okay.
ground up in a wood chipper.
Oh, okay.
That's my guess. Yeah, lots of little tiny cedar trees here.
Why is the white clover more common than the red? Like, I see all the white.
So the white clover, you notice it's growing like in the grass. So it's low enough to the ground that it will grow where they mowed it.
Oh, okay.
And so it's like getting plenty of sunlight because there aren't taller things shading it out. And it's actually, it flowers for more of the year than the red clover does too.
Oh, okay.
So,
It's like you see so much of it, but you don't see the red one.
right. The red one won't really grow in mowed ground. What'd you see?
No, just a blackbird.
Oh, it's a red-winged blackbird on that
hanging
stem
on.
there, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be able to hold up a bird, but I guess maybe birds aren't as heavy as I think. Me either. I've never seen a bird just hanging out on a weed.
That kind of bird likes to do that. They'll go in the cattails and they'll hang on a stem and just like hold their feet onto it sideways, and with them sitting straight up while their feet are held onto a sideways perch.
He is perfectly relaxed.
Yeah. These are silver maple trees, and then that's a cherry tree.
Well, this one has cherries on it where they're green. But
Yeah, they're green, but they're there.
The other ones I don't think had anything on
Right,
them.
so these will turn red and then black, and that's when they're ripe, is when they're very dark reddish purple. They look black. You can eat them, yep. They're very small, so the pit takes up a lot of that, so you just kind of gotta, you know, eat them carefully, but well, no, the seeds are pretty hard and they have poison in the center of the pit, which, you know, tame cherries do too, so do peaches, but plums, but you know.
Is that the tree that will kill cows? The black cherry?
Possibly,
They rub up
yeah.
against?
Maybe if they eat the wilted leaves, which they won't do unless they just don't have anything else green to eat. There was a thing, I don't know, it's been quite a while ago, maybe 15 years or so, but where a bunch of horses were miscarrying, and they thought that was one of the things they thought might be causing it, is eating the leaves from those, but it turned out to be something else, I think. Yeah, so tiny little cedar trees. They don't mind being small. There's the yarrow again. We'll go up to this tree line and see if we see anything different there.
So that's the cherries. If you
Mhm.
swallow them whole, though, that's fine, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
your stomach acids, or
I mean, they'll just pass through you undigested. Some traditional foods actually crushed them up and mixed them with things like meat and to make sort of a Swedish type of jerky. So that's, you know, you can actually eat what's inside the kernel if you let it air out for a while. So like the cyanide that's in it breaks down after a short amount of time. Got some little grapevines growing up a garlic plant there. It's not going to get it very far, but it's trying. It's got all these little tendrils wrapped around the garlic scapes. And then here you can see this set of garlic bulbils have actually already started to sprout little stems.
What's the next phase after the stem?
So these will fall off and they'll turn into a new whole plant. These are just like tiny little bulbs, and these bulbs have already started to sprout. So these ones haven't, but let's see if I can pluck a few off of here.
Is this edible?
Yeah, it's basically smells and tastes just like garlic. It's Allium viniel, so it's a different species than garlic, but it's very similar. These aren't one to come off; they're not ready yet. Here we go. Let's take a section of them. You can see in this cross section, there are lots of just tiny little bulbs of garlic.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, tiny little bulbs.
So little.
Yeah, and so those will grow into new garlic plants, and they're very successful. You can see there's a lot of them through here.
Is it wild onion in here too, like the
Yeah.
onion bulbs?
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing. Some people call it wild onion, some people call it wild garlic. To me, it tastes a little more garlicky, but yeah.
Is that you can eat it at any stage, or
You can eat it at any stage. I usually eat the softer, not the scapes that are the stem that comes up with the bulbs on the top, but the regular leaves of it, which are like hollow tubes also. I usually chop those up and use them to season food with. More of the yarrow, and oh, what do we got here? I thought it was going to be the valerianella, but it's like a wild baby's breath type of thing. So yeah, lots of the yarrow, and over there too. And these are the pear tree again. I was checking to see if there was a central stump that had been cut down that these were all growing up from, but it doesn't. I can't see one. But yeah, this is the invasive pear again.
it's nice to meet everyone down here.
Thank you so much for the water. Glad to see you again.
You too. I'll see you. I'll pop in the class. It's again kids. So
Kids stuff, but yeah, okay. Well,
yeah, I'll see you on the
Thursday.
the evenings that I can make it.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming.
Are you all from here in Lexington?
No, we're from Louisville. Well, we live in Louisville. We moved here from Atlanta. I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
You're from all over the place.
I was just near Mobile.
Did you go to the beach down there, like Gulf Shores?
Well, my uncle lives in Wetumpka.
Oh, I know where that is.
Yeah, and so we stopped all the way to the beach.
Oh, I got you. I bet you had some good seafood and fresh food down there.
Yes.
The food is real good.
Well, we've been on down to Destin, which is pretty close.
Oh,
but
Destin's water is so pretty. That's the prettiest water I've ever seen. It's so bright blue. It's like turquoise almost.
So this is all bush honeysuckle here. It's a really common weedy plant, weedy bush. And you can see it gets quite dark underneath it. So it's so shady underneath it that pretty much not much will grow under there.
Probably some creepy crawly things down there.
Maybe, yeah. Be a good place to hide away. But yeah, so this will grow in a lot of the time it will grow under power lines or in ditches and things like that. And it'll grow into a big bush that's maybe 15 feet tall or whatever, and can be pretty hard to get rid of. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I haven't seen any of it yet. It's small this time of year. Lots of robust growth of poison ivy over here, even coming out into the grass some. So watch out for that. Oh, here we got some birds doing bird stuff up in the air. You can see in this area, it's just kind of like been allowed to grow. It's not really trees yet, but it's starting to make that transition. So we've got lots of tall asters, and then we've got a lot of grapevines trying to grow over top of everything, trying to soak up sun while they can. So these grapevines will probably fruit this year, and because they're pretty close to the ground, a lot of things like possums and raccoons and stuff will come and get them that might have a harder time getting them if they were further up in trees. I mean, they can climb trees, but the grapevine doesn't need as much structural support as a lot of the animals that eat it. Yeah, this one's growing all over this tree. And then of course you get these berry bushes that'll grow up through the middle of it as well. This blackberry, this is a new first year growth of blackberry. This was probably not here at all a couple weeks ago, and has just shot up since. And that will fruit next year usually. So it's like it's its own type of plant community, and you get different plants growing in this type of area than you get growing in, you know, some of the other areas that we've seen. So, you know, even just today we've seen different types of plants, different communities of plants growing in like slightly different environments, like next to the barn or by the pond or whatever. So little micro habitats with different sets of plants growing in them, and a lot of common ones that show up over and over, like the poison ivy and the blackberries.
Are there deer here?
There are deer here, yeah. They mostly come out in the early morning and early evening. And then during the day they lay down in stuff that's tall enough to hide in.
Predators,
Yeah. Just want to walk up to this big tree. You can see that that's a mature tree that would have been here a while ago. Yeah.
So many years.
Right. So all of this was just field, and they left a few trees for shade and maybe for nuts and things like that.
Little bird's nest in it.
Don't see any, but there's lots of cavities, so there's probably owls and things like that nesting in it. Lots of hollow spaces. So yeah, this tree's real old, you know, might fall down the next time the wind is bad, might stand for another 50 years. It's kind of hard to tell. But trees like this, you know, they provide a lot of places for animals to hide out and stuff like that. Some of these ones over here have some holes too. So that's a hackberry tree, and it's probably not that old, but
Squirrels and mice living.
yeah. And there are a lot of things like screech owls, they'll only nest if they have something like that to nest in. So, and then they can kind of control populations of things like mice and moles and stuff like that. And then that can affect what kind of plants grow because it affects who's burrowing in the ground and digging stuff up, all that. All right, let's see. Is there a clear way back the way we came this way, or is it going to lead us off? No. Okay. Yeah, let's just go back the way we came. So I don't know where that's going to take us. If you look under the honeysuckle, this is called winter creeper, this stuff that's all over the ground. And it's one of the few things that will grow in the shade of honeysuckles. So in just about any park in Lexington and in many other cities in this part of the country, yeah, it's very common. Yeah, so it was sold as a ornamental plant, and it just kind of, because it's the only thing that'll grow in that really deep shade.
It's like ivy.
Yeah, so many of the invasive plants were just brought here as ornamental plants and not for any more practical reason. So probably for the next herb walk that we do, which will be later in the summer, we'll go out to the woods, and then maybe in the fall we'll come back here and see some different plants out here at that time of year. So a lot of things that are just getting started now, or even that aren't up at all now, that will be kind of the dominant plants later on.
Then we get to see the leaves turn, the prettiness of the red and brown.
Yeah.
Some red and brown leaves. Next time I'm going to bring a basket with me to collect some cedar so I can make a smudge.
Yeah.
Some sage. I'm going to mix the two, you know.
Uh-huh.
That's my thought process.
Right.
I'll see how that works. It clears the air. Some people use it for...
So you burn it for smoke.
Yeah, a smudge of smoke. Yes, that's
Got
exactly.
one under my nightstand. I'll show you.
Yeah.
Wrapped up and
It's a good little stand of the red clover.
Can we bring baskets or don't do that? Like, are we
Not
allowed
really
to-
supposed to
Okay.
here. There's some other places
Yeah, I didn't know
you
if it's a
can.
national forest and we're
It's
not
just
really
a
supposed to do
city
that.
park,
Okay.
technically. But
I was surprised we saw cedar. I didn't think we'd see that today.
yeah,
It's hard to find that.
I bet you'll see a lot of it now that you know what you look.
just remind me.
Okay.
There's always this weird fungus that grows on it every year. It's
Really?
like orange.
Mm-hmm.
wow.
That's called cedar apple rust.
Is that edible?
It's not, but it grows on cedars and it doesn't really harm the cedars. But then the other phase of its life, it grows on apple trees and it kills them.
Oh gosh, okay. I got those too.
But
If only the apples this year.
yeah,
Starting to grow. Oh no. We'll never get peaches.
No, they're starting to come, right?
Are they?
it's a cool year for it as far as Kentucky goes. But you know, some years they do well here, and some years they, you know, it's too damp or too cool for them.
Yeah, my dad, he makes cedar tea.
Does he? Good.
I've tasted it and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
But
It's good for you, though.
I've never really.
I bet it smells good with to make a smudge out of it, though. You know what I mean?
Drinking it during COVID, so it was supposed to help
It's good
prevent
for
it.
you. Yeah. Well, I always thought it was good for colds, but I guess COVID is kind of like a cold. But I don't think it tastes good either.
No, he I swear.
You can put honey
He
in it,
doesn't
though.
have taste buds because he can.
He
Oh.
treats the most disgusting.
Yeah.
He can put honey in it. That may make it taste better.
His coffee consists of like,
Hi, Ann.
all kinds of. But you know,
Oh, wow.
man is 70, and I've
That's
never
why
known.
he's 70.
I've never known
Yeah.
him to ever be sick.
Yeah, he's probably very healthy.
We'll all be having colds and allergies, and he'll walk right in when everybody's sick and never gets sick. That's just something to it.
He knows what he's doing.
Vinegar.
The apple cider vinegar, yeah. I've seen people put that in their green tea. They'll mix that with green tea.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video.